Good morning, cadets. Sorry for the delay in this video, but it's about time we get this up and running. This is a recap of the first week, in which case we're going to go ahead and talk about doing a mask over letters or a clip to letters using this image right here. And also, we're going to talk about how to give it a little bit of depth by making certain parts of the image stand outside of that text. So what I need you to do is we're going to start by first off opening up whatever image you'd like to use for this project. In this case, I'm using this large elephants near lake, which I downloaded from Pexels, Pexels.com. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my type tool here on the left hand side. Just go and give that a click. And all I'm really going to do for now is I'm just going to click and drag. Now I didn't just click, I'm clicking and dragging right across the image, just depending on how big I want my text box to be. Now, prior to this, I used to just click and start typing, which is fine, but the new versions of Photoshop do this weird thing where it kind of pops open these option boxes for you. I don't want to deal with that. All I want to do is just put text on screen. And once I let go, by default, on the newer versions of Photoshop, again, it'll put this lorem ipsum text, which is called dummy text usually, just to kind of have a visualization of what's going to look like. If you're using earlier versions of Photoshop, you won't have that. It'll just be blank, so that's perfectly fine. Irregardless of what happens on screen, what you're going to do is you're just going to type in what you like. And for me, I'm just going to go ahead and do all caps for this. I'm going to go ahead and type in family. Now, the reason I actually want to stick with capitals in this case, as well as some really beefy letters, is because I want to have enough room inside the letters so I can see my elephants, as you'll see in a few moments. Now, if for whatever reason, if your text is either too small or maybe it's so big that you can't even see the whole thing, maybe it's like you typed in family, you typed in family, but sadly what happened was maybe your type is so big it kind of went outside the box or something. It's not a big deal. All you have to do is just click and drag right across the type itself. So I'm holding on my left mouse button. I'm just clicking and dragging so I can highlight it all. And with this set, I can go up to the top and I can choose a size that I want from this list. If you want to use numbers, you can always click and drag to highlight the value inside that field and type in whatever number that you want. Or you can put your mouse cursor right over the double T symbol here. As you see, it turns a little finger with double arrows, and you can click and drag that to the right or left, depending on if you want to increase or decrease your font size. Just be aware, if I let go halfway through, I will have to go back to that T symbol, hold down my left mouse button again, and click and drag again to continue on from where I left off. Now in this case, it looks like it's going to max out at 1296 because it looks like that's probably as much as going to fit in the box. It used to be that if your text was beyond that size, it would actually start clipping part of your type. You wouldn't be able to see, for example, the Y and then the L because it was just too big. It wouldn't all fit. But in this case, it looks like they have a little bit of a safety constraint in the newer version. So I'm just going to go ahead and chalk that up as a halfway decent thing. So once I have my type in place, if you want to move it around the screen, by the way, you can't click and drag on the text itself necessarily because that just puts you in selection mode. But what you can do is if you place your mouse cursor outside the type, you'll see it turns into a little arrow. And with that arrow, you can click and drag to reposition to put your text approximately where you want it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean this is where it's going to wind up in the grand scheme of things. This is mostly just so I can kind of get it roughly where I want my elephants to appear. And really what I want to do here is I just kind of make it look like the little baby elephant at the bottom. I'm just going to make it kind of around here. So what you start to see is his trunk comes out the bottom of the eye here. Now again, if you want to move this around and make it come out the bottom of the L or something, that's perfectly all right too. All right, it's entirely up to you how you want to address this. But I'm just kind of framing it in such a way that I know part of the elephant will extend beyond the constraints of the letters. Now, the color of my text, I don't care about because we're not going to see the color of the text at all. When we're done, we're actually going to wind up clipping the elephants to the type layer. So all you're going to see is the elephants in the backdrop. You won't see any of the original color you chose for the text. So my suggestion for this is just make it something you can actually see on screen. Mine was white originally, which inverted it when I selected it, made it black. So again, it's just easier to see. But if you are using like a high key image where everything is really bright white or light, you might want to choose a brighter, a little more of an intense color. In this case, maybe like a red or an orange or something, so it stands out. But again, at the end of the day, it's not going to matter because once you're finished, You're not going to see any of this color at all. So I'll leave mine red as an example, but again, it doesn't matter what yours is set to, so long as you can see it on screen. Now with my settings in place, I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark over here to apply my type, and that is going to be where basically I'm going to center it in relation to my elephants. Now what I want to do next is I want to make sure I put this background layer above my type layer. And to do that, I'm just going to come on down here to the background layer. I'm going to hold down my Alt key for Windows or Option key for the Macintosh. And I'm just going to click once on this little lock icon. Now again, that's Alt for PC, Option for Mac. I want to give that a click. It's going to unlock the background layer. So that's just going to allow me to kind of move it around my layers panel to whatever position I want it to be in. So layer 0 here, I can just click and drag this up right above family. As you see, family disappears. It's not gone though. If I switch over to my move tool at the top of my toolbar here, I can click and drag on this layer. And as you can see, I can still move it around. That's perfectly fine. And you'll notice that family was kind of hiding out behind here. So now with this layer set, I can go ahead and clip it to the family layer. I'm just going to hold on my Alt or Option key and place my mouse cursor in between the two layers. Now that's Alt for PC, Option for Mac. And when I put it between the two layers, I can just go ahead and give this a click. And as you can see, it's just going to go ahead and pop this right in the place so you can see it fills up the text. Now, if you're not big on shortcut keys, if you prefer to do it via a menu or something, you can always right-click your mouse button on this layer 0. And from here, you can choose Create Clipping Mask, and that will do the same thing for you. And if you need to get rid of it, you can right-click it again and choose Release Clipping Mask. So as you can see, that just go ahead and we'll make it disappear from there. So now that the elephants are here, as you can see, I've clipped them. I really want to make it so I can see the little baby elephant kind of stand out from everything. So follow with me here. I'm going to go ahead and unclip this again. Now, you don't have to do it in this process. You don't have to clip it and then unclip it. I just decided at this point I wanted to do something a little extra, so I'm just going to step backwards in essence. So I'm just going to go ahead and release clipping mask. I right-clicked here and chose release clipping mask. And I also have the elephant layer selected. This is very important. Make sure you're on the correct layer when you do this kind of work, because if I'm on the family layer down here, the text, it'll do something entirely different. So now I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so I can see my baby elephant a little bit better. Control or Command plus a couple times. Just go ahead and zoom in there. And if I want to pan around like so, you can hold your spacebar on your keyboard and click and drag. And from here, I'm just going to go ahead and grab my quick selection tool. By the way, you do have a little bit of a different arrangement here inside of Photoshop CC. Earlier versions of Photoshop, you'll probably see things differently, but I'm just going to go ahead and hold down my mouse button here on the magic wand tool and select quick selection tool from the list. You'll see the shortcut key for this is the letter W. All right. Now, that only gets that tool slot, by the way, if you tap W, and just W, not Shift W or Control or Command W. If you need to toggle between the different tools in that list, hold on your Shift key and tap W, and every time you do, you'll see you kind of toggle between those tools. So I'm going to grab my quick selection tool. Options here across the top. I'm just going to make sure this is set to Add Plus. Size of my brush, I'm going to say maybe size of 10 to 20 max. Hardness 100%. All right, you can barely see it, but it's there. Let's see. Sample layers is not checked. Enhanced edge is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on down, and I'm just going to click and drag right across just the area that I want to select from the baby head. I'm going to grab his whole face if I can. And as you can see, as I click and drag down, it automatically kind of jumped away from my mouse cursor and just grabbed everything in the surrounding area, which is great, because it's going to save me a little bit of grief when I try to go and select the majority of his head. But there are some areas that will probably give me issues. Like, for example, here when I clicked and dragged, it jumped away from him and grabbed his entire body. So I'm going to do a Control or Command Z, step backwards, and I'm not going to be able to grab this spot. Every time I click and drag across it, you see it just goes, oh, we're just going to take everything. So we know that's an area to stay away from for the time being. I'm just not going to be able to achieve it with this tool. So I'm just going to grab what I can, and it looks like I get up to out here, and that's about it. That's all I can really seem to select at the moment. I need to grab his ear as well, but it's just not going to let me under these circumstances. And you can see he has this little tusk right here too, and I can't really grab that. So at this stage, what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to go ahead and come on down here to my quick mask. Now, when I hit quick mask, you will probably wind up with something like this. Okay, everything that's currently not selected is in red, and everything that is selected is just transparent so it can see the original color. But if you have some issues with quick mask, there is a way around this. You can always double click this little icon, this quick mask icon, and it'll ask you what the color indicates, whether it's considered the masked areas or selected areas, as well as the color and the opacity. Now, I'm going to leave mine set to masked areas for the time being. I'm just going to hit OK, and then I can go back in the quick mask just by hitting it one more time. And as you can see, it's back in the quick mask mode. You can also do that just by hitting the letter Q if you just kind of want to go back and forth with a keyboard shortcut. Just remember, just the letter Q, not Control Q, because that would be bad. Just in case you haven't seen that, that means quit. So I've got it set like this. Now, if yours is inverted, don't sweat that. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's inverted. The worst thing that's going to happen if it's wrong, we can just invert the mask when we're done, and we'll be finished. Now, if you accidentally clicked again with your quick selection tool, so you have marching ants on top of the red, that's not a good thing. We do have to get rid of those marching ants. So if this happens to you, Control or Command D, D for deselect, or if you go to Select menu and choose Deselect from the list, that will get rid of those marching ants for you. So here, I just need to clean up this little part where his ear is, and I'm just going to use my brush tool here. I'm going to grab my regular brush tool, set to the color black in the foreground. Okay, so if you have to, you can hit the letter D. Actually, I probably messed that up. Yeah, I did. I botched that. Not black in the foreground so much. I need white in the foreground, but here's the cool thing. If I hit the little icon here, this top little tiny black and white icon, that will just ensure that you're using a solid tone of black and white as your foreground and background colors. And to toggle between those, hit this little arrow key here. As you can see, it switches. The difference between them, if I have black in the foreground and I paint here, as you can see, it actually subtracts from my selection. Whereas if I switch over and hit this little arrow and put white here, as I click and drag to paint over, it erases part of that. So I need the baby set here to be completely transparent. So I'm going to make sure white in this case in the foreground. Options across the top here. I'm going to go ahead and choose my brush. And I'm just going to click inside of here. And I want to choose one of those round brushes up at the top of the list under General Brushes here. And with that set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go under General Brushes if you don't see them, if you're using the new versions of Photoshop, and just choose one of those hard round brushes. If you're using an old version, hard round brushes are at the top of the list, so you should be good. The mode's at normal. Opacity and flow are 100%. And what this is going to allow me to do is just paint over this area by clicking and dragging, just to erase the part that I want to keep in my selection. Now, you'll notice my selection isn't the greatest thing in the world. It's a little messy here and there. Not a problem, though, because what I can do is I can always go back and switch to black again and just paint over the parts that I messed up on. And as you can see, it just goes right back and cleans it all up for me. So once I have my selection made, I am free to exit the quick mask mode. I can either hit the quick mask icon here or hit the letter Q. And you should see the red disappear, and all you have left is the marching ants. All right. Now, if you did mess up, for example, all I wanted is tusk, well, I can hit Q again, go back in here, zoom in with Control or Command plus so I can get a nice close view. And I can shrink my brush down pretty easily by hitting the left or right bracket keys on the keyboard. Those are those little they're on the same key as those little squiggly lines to the right of the letter P. Okay. And I can go ahead and use white here, and I'm just going to go ahead and just paint this out. And if you're really nitpicky about this stuff, you're like, but I got all the schmutz. Okay, not a problem. Go back with the color black. And to switch back and forth quickly, by the way, I'm just hitting the letter X again. See? X. So in this case, I can go back with the black and just paint over this little area. And if I go a little bit too far, not a problem. I can switch over to the white and just paint over that until everything is clean. All right. So you're just going to go back and clean over that edge just until everything is nice and tidy. And when I hit the letter X on my keyboard, my bad. I'm not hitting X. Letter Q, right? Letter Q. That's going to go ahead and get me out of there and show me just the selection. Now, a little test for you. If you zoom out a little bit, if your selection looks like this at the moment, where it's like not only do you have marching ants going around the baby head, but you also have it going around the entire picture, that means everything but the baby's head is selected. So what you need to do, if yours looks like mine, is you just need to invert your selection. Go up to select and choose inverse, and that will just make sure that the marching ants are only around the baby elephant and nowhere else. So if yours looks like this, you're good. You don't have to do anything. But if yours, again, looks like that, well, okay. Go to select, inverse, make sure it's just around the baby elephant head. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and cut it out, but I don't just want to cut it out because maybe I want to do a little more masking in the future. So what I suggest here is if I come over to the layers panel real quick, I'm just going to right click in the blank space next to layer 0 here. Okay, so again, I'm just right clicking in the blank space next to layer 0. And I'm going to choose duplicate layer. Now it'll ask me for a layer. In this case, I can call it baby elephant. Same document. We're not putting to a different document. So I'm just giving a name for a layer. I'm just baby elephant. Hit OK. And it'll create a duplicate copy of layer 0. Now this isn't anything different than this one. It's just an exact replica. But with the marching ants in place and this replica selected, from here, I'm just going to click on the mask icon, which is down here, the little box with the circle inside of it, and you'll see a layer mask appears here as well. But again, you don't see anything change inside your picture. The reason why is because I've cut out a copy of this baby elephant head and put it exactly into the same spot. If I use my move tool for a second and clicked and dragged, you'll see that we actually do have the baby elephant head. Or if you don't even mess around with it, you can always just disable the copy underneath it real fast and see that the baby elephant head is its own thing. Okay. Now, with that done, I can go and select my layer 0, which is the original copy of the elephants. And with that said, I can right click on it and I can choose create clipping mask, and that will attach it to the, there we go. That will attach it to the text. And now I have my cutout. So as you can see, it just kind of drapes over the text. Now remember, this is an optical illusion, because if I use that top layer here and I move it, you'll see the baby elephant moves and it destroys the illusion. It's just because it's lined up with the original copy, it gives you the illusion that's popping out of the text itself. Now, if you want to be able to move this around as a whole entity, what I recommend is just go ahead and you're going to put all these elements into a group. Just by the top layer selected, I can come on down, hold on my shift key, and click on the family layer, the text layer, so it's all highlighted. And if you do Control G, if you're using Windows, or Command G, G is in group, on the Mac, that will just go ahead and put it into a group for you. So at this point, you should be able to move around the group on its own, as is, and everything is set up. Now, if you're using your Move tool, right, if you use your Move tool, make sure Auto Select in this case is turned off. Because if it's on and it's set to layer, I might still wind up doing this, and group or not, it's just going to move around individual pieces. So what you want to do is make sure auto select is turned off in this case, and when you move, always move from the group itself. As you can see, you can click and drag to reposition. Quick little bonus for you. This first one was actually suggested by Carol Sheets. Thank you very much, Carol. If you go into the group here and you select family, if I pop on down to the effects symbol at the bottom of my layers panel, I'm going to go ahead and choose stroke from the list. And when I choose stroke, let me pull my layer style menu over here for a second so you can see it. When I choose stroke, you have a size control. As you see, default for mine right now is gray. I can change position of my type, or not my type. I'm sorry, not my type, my outline. So I can actually put it inside the text. And as you see here, it makes it a little sharper for the edges. Previously, when I had this set to outside, as you see, it kind of rounds the corners, but in this case, inside makes it nice and clean. Size, I can go ahead and adjust the size. Color, right? I can adjust the color to whatever color I like, and you can create a nice little effect to make it look like it's got some extra depth because the elephant trunk is kind of extending beyond this outline on the type. So adding a little bit of a stroke to the edge of your type might be kind of a cool thing. The other little trick you can do, just to give this a little more pizzazz, is I'm going to go ahead and make an additional layer underneath here, but I don't want to make it as part of this group. So the first thing I'm going to do in my layers panel is I'm going to close the group by hitting this little arrow, and then I'm going to come on down and click on the create new layer icon. And I want to make sure this brand new layer is underneath the group. So I'm just going to click and drag it down. So not just on the group, because I'll put it in there, which is bad. I'm actually going to drag it down underneath group and let go. So it has its own space underneath. And with this set, I need to choose two colors, a foreground and a background. So if I come on my foreground color here and give it a click, I'm going to start by choosing, I'm going to choose like a nice sort of yellowy, bright color. Something almost borders in the greenish range. And when I hit OK, I'm going to come on down to the one underneath it. I'm going to choose something like a nice green. All right, I'm going to choose some kind of minty here. And this might totally blow up in my face. It may not be a good color combination at all, but I don't know. I think it's going to be nice and warm and cute. So I'm going to use these two colors. I'm going to use my gradient tool. Now the gradient tool you can find if you're using CC, it's under this list here. If you hold down your mouse button for a second, usually it's right here if it's not there by default. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, you can grab the gradient tool from the list. It looks like this box that fades from black to white. Or you can hit the letter G, G as in gradient, and that should be able to pick it up for you. It's in the same tool slot as the paint bucket tool in earlier versions of Photoshop, so you might have to go digging for it. My settings across the top here, if I hit the little arrow, and it's important, don't click on the box here because that opens up your gradient editor, which is a whole different ballgame. But the little arrow next to the gradient box here, I'm just going to go ahead and go to the Basics tab up at the top. If you're using CC, if you're using an older version, it'll just be like the first square here on the left-hand side. But I'm going to choose the color representation of the two colors I just picked. You'll see it in this box, and that will be the one I want. The next options, I'm going to make sure this little round circle is checked for radial gradient. The mode is set to normal. The opacity is at 100%. Reverse is not checked, but the last two options, dither and transparency, are. Dither is just going to help smooth out the tones between your gradient a little bit, and the transparency is if your gradient has transparent areas, which some do, it'll preserve that. And with that set, I can just kind of put my mouse cursor roughly into the middle of my canvas. Don't try to sit there and make it perfect, just roughly. And if I hold down my mouse button and drag it to a corner and let go, it's just going to pop out a nice little gradient for me, so it creates just a simple backdrop. Okay, so click and dragging out will do that. If you decide you want a different color scheme, that's fine. Come on over, click on one of these colors and change it to whatever color you want to use. And then you'll have to come back over and do it again. So hold down from the middle, drag to the corner, and let go. And as you can see here, you can go ahead and change this until you find a nice gradient that suits you for the type of project that you're doing. Okay? So hope you learned a couple new things here, especially on the clipping and the masking part. We're going to do a lot more with masking as time goes on, so stay tuned. And I will see you guys later.